This is my story of being cornered like a rat in a restaurant kitchen by a complete stranger who tried to murder me for the type of music that I listen to. There is an unwritten code in Brooklyn. You don't tell anyone else's stories, and you don't talk about anyone else's business. Every story I tell is mine. Locations, names, and specific details have all been changed to honor that code. This is Brooklyn Files, the real stories.
For this story to make sense, you gotta understand that Brooklyn is a very segregated place. You've got the segregation of sports teams. You've got Giants fans, Jets fans, Mets fans, Yankees fans, Islanders, Rangers. I mean, we had two of every team, so of course, people would choose one and then they would be prejudiced against the people that like the other team. And it can vary from passing a street corner with a bunch of guys and maybe a couple of them are wearing Mets shirts and hats, and then they see a guy with a Yankees hat, and then they'll say something that's like, "Hey, your mother," and then next thing you know, it's a brawl. And that happened all the time, which is probably part of the reason why I never really became an avid sports fan in any which way, because I guess I just was never willing to die for choosing a team, so I just decided it wasn't worth it, and so I just was never that passionate about it.
Violent crime in Brooklyn occurs at a rate higher than in most communities of all population sizes in America. The chance that someone will become a victim of violent crime in Brooklyn, such as armed robbery, aggravated assault, or murder, is 1 in 224.
But people would segregate over religion, so the Jewish kids didn't like the Catholic kids, and then the Italian kids didn't like the Irish kids, and vice versa. I don't know, I was kind of weird like that. I didn't care. I had friends of every kind. Half my friends were Jewish, the other half were Italian, and every other possible nationality and race, etc. But there was this one area where kids would segregate, and it was just the oddest thing. It was over the music that you listened to. So back in like the 80s, you had rockers, and then you had like the disco people. When I say the 80s, it's like late 70s, early 80s. So the disco kids had the big boom boxes, and we would put the 22D batteries in it and go, and some of these boxers are like this big, some of them were smaller. But we listened to the disco on those boom boxes.
First introduced to the American market in the mid-70s, and before the Walkman and MP3 player, there was the boombox, a term given for the large transportable battery-operated radio cassette player. The boombox got its name partly due to its boxy shape and its ability to carry lots of bass through its oversized speakers. Boomboxes became ultra popular in the 80s, becoming synonymous with hip-hop and breakdancing. With its growing popularity and with competition from numerous manufacturers, over time these portable players became increasingly larger and requiring more battery power, some even being the size of a suitcase.
But then you had the kids that listened to rock, and you called those kids rockers. These kids were like a little scruffier. They wore like jeans with holes in them, and they wore the dungaree jackets with their favorite rock band inscribed on the back. And basically all it was is you took like a rock and roll t-shirt and you cut out this frame, and then you either glued it or sewed it to the back of your dungaree jacket. Then you put patches on it, and you'd have like, Def Leppard, and you'd have Ozzy and this and that, Rolling Stones, and those kids would like get stoned and hang out in the park and listen to their heavy metal music, and you'd hear it like, you'd hear it coming from the park, and you'd hear them breaking bottles and screaming and cursing and yelling. There was always rumors that the rockers were like devil worshippers. So there was like all these rumors like they would sacrifice animals, because people would find like dead birds and dead cats and stuff like where all the rock kids hung out. So it was weird. Like they were just doing crazy stuff, these kids. They were out of their minds. But then you had us disco kids. We would go to all these clubs in Brooklyn, like everyone was just cooler than the next, and there'd be crowds outside, lines getting in. Some nights they'd have performers like Divine or Lime, those bands, of course these freestyle bands would be playing, and it was really cool. We used to love going to those clubs. Plus, there was a lot of women at the clubs. But we were the disco kids, so the rock kids hated us, or the rockers, they hated us, just for the music that we listened to. So one night I'm at the mall with my buddy Billy from school, and this kid's like 80 pounds soaking wet, and his boombox is about as heavy as he is. It's about 80 pounds, and this thing's got speakers like this, and it takes like 92D batteries, and with the batteries in it, it must have been like 200 pounds, this radio. I'm exaggerating, but it was crazy. And he had a gigantic radio, it had the soft eject, and it had the LEDs, and this thing was loud, and it had a lot of bass, and it was wonderful. So we're walking from the mall. It almost took two of us to carry this boombox. We're passing the park where the Rockers are. And in the distance, you can kind of hear the metal music playing, and you hear like, you hear like, noise and people cursing and yelling, and you hear bottles smashing, and you hear the music going, and that kind of thing. So my friend Billy has this great idea. He decides to turn the radio up like really loud and put it like on his shoulder like that. So I'm sure they must have heard it, a couple of 100 feet away inside the park. Next thing you hear, kill him! So my friend Billy has this great idea. He decides to turn the radio up like really loud and put it like on his shoulder like that. So I'm sure they must have heard it, a couple of 100 feet away inside the park. Next thing you hear, kill him! This was not a prank. These kids were not joking. They literally wanted to kill us because we were listening to disco. And I won't tell you the other things they were calling us, but they started chasing us. So now there's about 9 guys that leave this park. All you do is you see like these silhouettes of like 9 people, rockers, dirty guys, like with their long hair and their dungaree jackets, and they're all chasing us. So all of a sudden, Billy, with his boombox, he disappears. I don't know where he goes, but all of a sudden this kid has the power of like 20 men, and he just runs and just disappears in the distance with that 90-pound boombox or whatever it was. So I just run. So as I'm running, I keep turning around to see if like these guys are gaining on me. And there's like 2 or 3 of them gaining on me. They're maybe like, 80, 100 feet behind me, but they're getting closer. Another maybe 50, 100 feet, 2 of them fall off. Now there's this one guy, and he's like, this guy's on my tail. He's about 30 feet behind me, and he's screaming, I'm gonna kill you. So as I'm running, I keep turning around to see if like these guys are gaining on me. And there's like 2 or 3 of them gaining on me. They're maybe like, 80, 100 feet behind me, but they're getting closer. Another maybe 50, 100 feet, 2 of them fall off. Now there's this one guy, and he's like, this guy's on my tail. He's about 30 feet behind me, and he's screaming, I'm gonna kill you. And he looked like he had the devil in his eyes, this kid. So suddenly, I cross the street, I see an Italian restaurant. Now, interestingly enough about this Italian restaurant, I kind of sort of knew the owners because they used to live next door to me. I kind of knew them, and I didn't know if they'd know me, but I didn't care. I just wanted to run to where there would be people. I didn't know if this restaurant was gonna be open, but it was maybe 9:30, 9:45, and I just took my chances and I just bolt to this restaurant, and I'm praying this thing is open. So I pull the handle, the door opens. As soon as I enter the door, I hear this wedding going on. It wasn't like dinner, it was like the Tarantellas playing. And all of a sudden I'm hearing like, rah, rah, like crowds of people, and I'm hearing like people clapping and dancing, and there's a wedding going on, like an Italian wedding, a big one, inside this restaurant. So I don't care about that. I'm just thinking there's people here and I could at least run to safety, and maybe I could like blend into this crowd or just run through this restaurant. I wasn't really thinking, I was just trying to survive at this point. So in I go into this wedding, and I'm weaving. I'm crouching down and I'm trying to like hide. I'm trying not to be seen by this guy, but I'm also trying not to be too noticeable to the people in the wedding. I wasn't dressed like them, but I'm weaving in and out of the crowd, and I'm like going around the bride, and I'm passing this guy, and I finally get into the kitchen. I see the 2 doors with the circle windows. I bust through, I get into the kitchen. There's these 2 like dishwashers, like they were not cooking at this point because it was like almost closing this restaurant, and the wedding was probably, in its final half hour. I get into the kitchen, these 2 guys are looking at me like, who are you and what are you doing here? And they're just looking at me. And I said, this guy is trying to kill me, he's chasing me. They had no idea what I was saying. They didn't speak a word of English, these guys. They're looking at me like, sorry, dude, can't help you. So I'm like, I'm screwed. Next thing I know, the door flies open. This guy, red hair, this guy looked like he hadn't slept in like 3 days. He's drunk, he's stoned, he's possessed. He has the devil in him, and he looks at me and he's like, you, I'm gonna kill you. And he runs towards me, and now I run on the other side of the kitchen counter, like in this big kitchen. And he reaches over to like the butcher's block, or like where the knife block is, and he grabs this big knife and he starts chasing me and he goes, I'm gonna kill you. And he's running with the knife, and I'm running around this kitchen counter, like this stainless steel kitchen, and I'm trying to avoid this guy, and I'm putting myself on the other side of the counter, hoping he doesn't like somehow fake me out. And these guys that worked in the kitchen are looking at the two of us like, what the hell is going on? I was oblivious to what they did. I don't know if they went and told somebody, but I'm looking at this one guy and he's my only focus. I'm like, you are not gonna kill me tonight. And he reaches over to like the butcher's block, or like where the knife block is, and he grabs this big knife and he starts chasing me and he goes, I'm gonna kill you. Out of nowhere, and I don't know who these guys were, never saw them in my life, two big dudes in suits, well dressed. I don't know if they were with the restaurant, and I don't know if they were like with this wedding, but they busted in. They took a beeline to this guy that had the knife, and each of them grabbed this guy before he could even like notice they were there, and they just drag him. I'm sure the knife fell on the floor, but they just dragged this kid through the kitchen. They bust out the back door into this alleyway. And all of a sudden, I hear them pounding on this kid. They're beating the crap out of this kid. And on this side of my head, I hear the wedding going on over there. I hear this wedding outside in the dining room. And over here, I could hear this kid getting the crap beat out of him in the alleyway outside, and he's screaming for like dear life. And I could hear the pounding, and I hear his screaming. And I'm just sitting here like, what the hell is going on? Like, I can't believe that they just grabbed this guy, took him outside, and saved my life. And now I'm wondering who these guys were and what do I do next? The next thing I'm thinking is, wait a minute, just because they got this guy doesn't mean I'm not gonna be next. So I thought, I better get out of here because they may go after me next, and maybe it'll be my turn. So I was like, I'm not gonna wait around to find out. So the next thing I do is I beeline it, but I'm quiet, and I go to that back door where they just took this kid out into the alley, and I'm thinking to myself, I hope it's dark enough back there, and I hope I can be quiet enough that they don't see me leave the restaurant. I get out in the alleyway, I walk past the dumpster where they were like behind this thing, pounding this kid, and I go past the dumpster and I go out in the street and I just run for dear life, and I just made it. But when I got to the street corner, I looked around to make sure that this other dude's friends weren't out there staking me out, waiting for me to come out of the restaurant, and they were gone. I don't know where they went. They probably went back to worshiping their devil and doing whatever they were doing and drinking and getting stoned, but they just left. I just beelined it back home. I never knew what happened to Billy. I never saw him that night. And this was the days before like smartphones and answering machines and voicemail. I just called him for like a couple of days. I think that Sunday I got him on the phone, and he said that he just hid in an alley and ducked under a car with his boombox and ditched these guys, but he was okay. It was a real close call. It was a scary night, man. I never forgot that.